when my PhD was coming to an end, there was an internship in the IS, which came up. There was actually, at that period of time, because there wasn't enough sports scientists to be employed, given the investment in the London Olympics, there was a lot of intern level jobs that came out most years for 3 or 4 years. So sort of good timing, I guess, in terms of being there. Got an interview, got offered the role. Nigel was on the panel. That always helps when you sort of build a relationship with somebody, and got offered the job. And then they said, well, could you start? That would be July. And they said, well, starting 1st of October. So I busily finished writing up my PhD to make sure that was done and dusted before I started. And yeah, started in the IS in October 2006 as an intern nutritionist. That year, sort of really working across a number of sports. Sort of went from there, really.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Kevin Currell, Director of Performance Support and Science at the English Institute of Sport. Kevin is one of the longest serving employees at the English Institute of Sport. Having started as an intern, he is now the Director of Performance Support and Science. Throughout his career, he has supported athletes through numerous Olympic cycles and worked with around 70% of the medalling sports at Rio alone. The EIS is celebrating 20 years of service to our athletes this year. During the episode, we discuss his early life and influences, as well as the traits present within top performing athletes and how working in a success-driven environment shapes his approach to leadership. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Currell to the show today. He is the Director of Performance Support and Science at the English Institute of Sport. The Institute has over 350 employees that help athletes from more than 40 sports become better athletes. And I'm really lucky to have Kevin on the show today. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so much to talk about. And I know obviously you can only focus on certain sports and 40 sports to cover. Probably you have that challenge every day trying to go through more. But where we tend to start is giving the listeners a little bit of a background on yourself and get to know you a little better. And normally find the best place to do that is to start talking about your childhood and school life. So if you kind of describe how you grew up and how was your childhood, what would you say?
Yeah, probably quite. So I grew up in rural Lincolnshire, in the middle of nowhere, on a farm actually. So my parents, grandparents, small farm. I guess didn't feel that at the time, but probably was. So I grew up in the middle of the nowhere where it's sort of like 10 miles to get to school and there was no street corner or anything like that. So
it sounds like an active life though, right? Active childhood.
Yeah, really active in terms of family worked on the farm. My granddad at the time sort of was in charge. There were a few hundred acres. We're not talking huge farm. Yeah, but the whole family would muck in. When I was really younger, there were sort of animals on the farm, cows, pigs, chickens, etc. And so I got older, but probably more relevantly, my granddad got older. He sort of got rid of those and brought in the wheat and the rapeseed and the barley and so on. So most summer holidays would be taken up with doing something on there. And when I was old enough, which I think was about 12, 13 at the time, I'd be driving tractors around the field, following combine harvesters in there. So very outdoor element of growing up for sure.
And then, so you say obviously you had to travel across to school and stuff. What was school life? Obviously, with the agricultural background, were you kind of drawn to certain subjects, or was it kind of the academic side?
I was never sort of top of the class, but certainly things like science, maths, I was sort of always up there. Sort of really enjoyed those subjects. I went to a grammar school at the time, so I passed 11 plus, and then my parents had to ferry me 11 miles or find a bus that would get us there. And my sister ended up going to a different school. So in hindsight now as a parent, then I kind of think, oh my God, what did they do for us?
Did you know, I was thinking about that the other day. I used to thinking about my dad used to finish work, drive all the way home, pick me up, take me out to training.
Yeah. But when I forgot my shin pads, I'm playing football tonight or something like that, and they sort of drive across and do it. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed school. I guess I was in a situation where I loved sport. That was my sort of passion. So PE day was always the best day, whatever day that was.
What was your first love sport-wise, if you had to pick one?
I played football.
Yeah.
All I guess my first sort of, I was actually thinking of my first sporting memory. I actually think it's sadly Hillsborough disaster, actually. I think I remember my dad sort of shouting, oh, come on, watch this, see what's happening on the TV. And obviously that's a disastrous time. But then my mum and dad both loved sport, actually. And my dad was actually a football referee. I assume he probably played before that, but I don't remember him playing. But I remember him being a referee, going off on a Saturday and Sunday and doing that at sort of local level. Made it interesting when he started to referee my teams. But so sort of football, really. I sort of Italia 90. The Football World Cup, Gaza and everything was probably that first real memory. Probably the first time I cried to a football match as well when we lost the penalty shootout to Germany. But yeah, I'd say like that, and then into the Barcelona Olympics in '92. They're probably the two sort of earlier memories of sort of watching sport. And then,
I've got that same one, that Barcelona one that sits in my memory as well. That's probably my first.
Yeah, sort of Chris Boardman, Linford Christie, Sally Gunnell, Steve Redgrave.
Matthew exactly. I remember the Derek Redmond one as well with the injury.
Exactly.
Around with his dad and stuff. Yeah, that's like, sticks in the memory.
Exactly. And I remember things like I always remember watching the diving for some reason, because I remember it was outdoors and great scene. I remember watching with my nan in the summer, and it's on the TV. And I still had no idea what's going on in most of the sports. Yeah, so that was probably my first sort of Olympic memory as well. So yeah.
I mean, thinking about those ones then, in terms of looking at what you're doing now for a career, obviously, at that point, everyone loved sport at the time, drawn to those certain subjects, the sciences, etc. Was there a moment when you thought, this is the career I want to go for? You've got to decide before you go to uni. Was there like a careers event, a careers interview with the teacher or something? Like, oh yeah, you should go to do this degree and then you can get this role.
I mean, I was convinced I was going to be a professional footballer.
Like a lot.
But I never got anywhere near. I didn't get any. I think I had trials for Grimsby Town, which was the local professional team. We were sort of in equivalent of the Championship now, I guess. Not even in the league at the minute, but I wasn't very good. I mean, particularly once they banned the double-footed tackle from behind, I was a sort of big centre-half who kicks people, and once they sort of clamped down on that a little bit, I wasn't good. So yeah, but I was still, even until I was 15, 16, I probably thought I was going to be a professional footballer, to be honest, and I clearly wasn't. As I kind of carried on,
reassessed kind of thing at some point.
Reassessed. I thought, okay, I'm going to have to think about this. So you sort of start to think about university and where you might go. I knew I was okay academically, sort of A's, B's, C's, sort of GCSE and then A level, and had an interest in science, love sport, good at science. Oh, you can put the two together. Okay, there's a sports science degree. Let's do that. So yeah, I don't remember the exact moment when I thought sports science, but you know, the love of sport and sort of a reasonable aptitude at science kind of, or interest, kind of put the two together. You sort of see there's these degree courses.
I guess they were pretty new at the time, or just started to roll out a little bit. Or?
I mean, they're certainly not like what they are today, where there's far too many of them, to be honest. There's nowhere near enough jobs for the level of.
Well, I guess when I went to, I always thought the same thing. So around those roles seem really specific, and obviously I know there is transferable knowledge in there, but it feels like. Yeah, I remember my university when we started.
Yeah, I mean,
200 people going on the course. You're thinking,
exactly.
What's the exit route? Kind of thing,
Exactly. And probably one of the few people with a sports science degree who actually gets to work in sports science. So when you look at the numbers that are churned out. So I went to uni, went to Liverpool, John Moores. I was a Liverpool fan. I still am a Liverpool fan, which probably wasn't why I chose to go to John Moores, but they had a big football interest at the time. They're still one of the universities that known for sort of football science. So I went there as well and chose there. I think Middlesbrough was my second choice, if I remember rightly. I didn't get the grades for John Moores. So.
And I guess at that time, gone there to do the kind of undergraduate. Yeah. In the role you're in now, I know, extremely academic. What was it you've moved through to do? Master's, PhD kind of thing. Was that all done at Liverpool as well? Or?
No. So I did my degree in Liverpool. Loved the city. The city's amazing. It was 20 years ago and it still is. Great place to be a student. It was more than 20 years ago now. A great place to be a student. The history of obviously football. It's a football mad city with the two football teams that are there, but obviously the Beatles and the music and everything. So it's a really creative, vibrant place, definitely a good place to be a student. I'm not sure my liver agrees with that, but a great place to be a student.
We'll get on to talk nutrition shortly.
Well, it's probably ironic what the career became, but I looked around, kind of got to the end of the degree and thought, actually, hang on, if I want a job, I'm probably going to need more than a degree. So I looked around for masters. Could have stayed in Liverpool, but chose to make a change. I went to Sheffield Hallam to do a master's degree.
So I don't know if my timeline's correct. I'm trying to, because I know the 20-year anniversary.
Yeah, it is 20 years old this year. Yeah, I've been there 16 years. So I've not been there for the full 20, but 20 years ago, the IS was formed in a sort of few small places around the country and has grown hugely.
Yeah, I don't know whether that influenced anything at the time, but I remember obviously Sheffield being the base at the moment, and that was, I'm not sure, when was that open?
It could have been. Probably was all being opened. The original plan, and I think it was John Major who sort of put the money into the National Lottery and then wanted to form an institute similar to the Australian Institute of Sport, which was very successful at the time. And the original idea would have been a centralised base in Sheffield. Therefore, there is a building called the English Institute of Sport if you go to Sheffield. We have an office in there, but they're different organisations. It's quite complicated. Right. So originally, but I don't remember there. That wasn't the reason for Sheffield. I went there, did that for a year, and then went to the Uni of Birmingham to do a PhD after a lot of job applications and PhD interviews, post my masters, and thinking, what am I going to do here? I've just done 4 years.
Yeah, and I guess, that's what a lot of, maybe some of our listeners as well, obviously they're running business and leading organisations, they potentially a lot of them might have done sports science as well. And I suppose at that point, when you're going down the route of master's, PhD, you specialise in, I suppose, a bit more and more each time. And what was your PhD in at the time that you did?
So my PhD was in how carbohydrates affect endurance performance. It was sponsored, paid for, funded by Lucas at the time, owned by GlaxoSmithKline at the time as well. So we were looking at how different forms of carbohydrate or sugar and how you combine them, and then whether different combinations make you go faster, which we did prove they did with the basis of a number of the drinks on the market at the minute. But as a part of a whole batch of research, not just myself, but some other students looking at different aspects of that at the time. Yeah, so I went to Birmingham for 3 years, still always knowing I wanted to do applied sports science, but I wasn't ready once I did my degree and masters. I wasn't sure enough, hadn't developed the people skills.
I was going to say, what's that like in terms of coming out of two different worlds, I suppose, academia and running the studies, etc., and then going into employment or into like a separate world, right? Obviously, it's employment with the professional team, obviously at the institute, but you're going to have different expectations and different demands.
Really different. I mean, there's obviously bits that do cross over, the technical knowledge, the planning of projects and good governance and stuff like that. So there are clearly elements that do cross over. I think I would say the level of accountability changes quite significantly to employment, to certainly as a PhD student in there. There's the pace. I'd definitely say the pace is different. I mean, you either like that or you don't. It's far messier, I'd say, in the applied world. In academia, you're doing research, you're teaching students. There's some processes. You want to put the highest quality research out that you can, so you put in controls in the studies. In applied world is inherently messy, far more of a focus on people skills, the ability to interact with other people, to change behaviour, to influence people.
I'm just going to touch on it in terms, when we say the applied world, are we talking about club sports scientist, or how would that look if you, and then maybe what was your first step out of into employment?
Yeah, so I did my PhD for 3 years. So by that point, I'd done 7 straight years of some sort of study and student element. I still knew I wanted to do applied work, go and work with elite athletes. That was my dream, to work with elite athletes. Probably could have been pro sport, could have been Olympic. Well, I wasn't fussy at the time, probably until London got the Olympics in 2005. I remember sat in my PhD office and watching the announcement that London was going to get the Olympics. And I thought, that's it, whatever it takes. I want to be involved. That's once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity. And I want to be involved. That could have been sweeping the streets or being a games maker, but fortunately it was a bit more than that at the time. And weirdly, actually, I got a few weeks before that, I had sort of a training course of what to do, something sort of skinfold assessment. So skinfold, the horrible looking caliper things that you sometimes see scientists or gym instructors holding to pinch people to see what their body composition is. And I'd done that, and I bumped into a guy called Nigel Mitchell, who just started as a nutritionist in the IS, and he was working with British Cycling at the time. And I'd met him before. He was a lecturer on my masters. We sort of bumped into each other, one of those moments in the corridor. I was like, I know you, don't I? And we got chatting, and I was about to go support a team who were doing something called the Race Across America, which is a non-stop bike race from one coast to the other. I said,
it was like 1,000 miles or something.
I can't remember how it was. Ridiculous. It took like 10 days, something like that. I mean, amazing experience. But so I got chatting to him about that, and he said, I've just started English Institute of Sport. You're interested in applied work. You were sort of getting more and more interested in nutrition as the sort of the specialism. He said, come up to Manchester and spend a day with me and just sort of see what he thinks, see if you like it. So later that summer, I drove from Birmingham to Manchester, a little bit scared, and sat with him while he was doing some work with athletes and sort of observed that, got to know him a little bit, and we kind of kept in contact. And then when my PhD was coming to an end, there was an internship in the IS, which came up. There was actually, at that period of time, because there wasn't enough sports scientists to be employed, given the investment in the London Olympics, there was a lot of intern level jobs that came out most years for 3 or 4 years. So sort of good timing, I guess, in terms of being there. Got an interview, got offered the role. Nigel was on the panel. That always helps when you sort of build a relationship with somebody, and got offered the job. And then they said, well, could you start? That would be July. And they said, well, starting 1st of October. So I busily finished writing up my PhD to make sure that was done and dusted before I started. And started in the IS in October 2006 as an intern nutritionist. That year of sort of really working across a number of sports. Sort of went from there, really.
Yeah, so you were based, so 2006, you were based in Manchester?
No, I was based in the Bisham Abbey.
Bisham Abbey, right, okay.
Yeah, so I was working with a range of sports, from weightlifting to canoeing, and eventually started to do some work with triathlon, which was based in Loughborough. So I started to sort of spend a bit of time in Loughborough. Yeah, started to work with triathlon and short track speed skating. And then a few months later, that sort of merged itself into a full-time job, more permanent job, working with those two sports. So that period of time, I went from sort of dabbled in the applied world, working, trying to do some voluntary stuff, getting work. So all of a sudden I was working with world champions and Olympians. So it was just an incredible experience. So.
Yeah, I guess for me, more of a I guess, curiosity as well in terms of like to understand what that looks like. If you're going in as an intern, I suppose when you work with the athletes, they're not flagged as, oh, this is an intern, not much experience or whatever.
No, you try not to, yeah.
Yeah. So when they're sitting down working with you, what are they expecting? A bit of an insight on that one in terms of, is it like, right, it's the case for weightlifters, but I need to make weight, or I need to stay in this size, don't want to get too big, etc. Is it? Are they not abdicating, but kind of empowering you, just saying, look, you just tell me what to eat and I'll do it, or is it? Are they more in? Is it a bit of a dialogue, argument?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a dialogue, and I wish it did actually just do what you say, but that definitely doesn't happen. I think you have to earn the right as an applied practitioner to work with the athletes. You have to build that relationship, unless there's something very specific that they're looking to solve, which is pretty rare. You have to earn the right, build the relationship, build their trust, build the credibility in your eyes, and it doesn't matter how many letters you got before or after your name. Can you build that relationship and understand their world, because they're experts in their world. Practitioner, you're an expert in whatever the ology is, so you have to work together. So yeah, it's definitely not that simple as well. It's great fun though, trying to work with them, and when you get the opportunity to work with the very highest level of athlete, it's really quite special to sort of see how hard they work and train, apply themselves, and they won't just let you in just because you have the right pieces of paper or accreditation. They will make you work for it, and that's quite good fun.
So I guess it's probably a good time to maybe just give a little bit of not background, but an overview of EIS. We talked about this a little bit in terms of when it was initially launched, etc. But how does it look at the moment in terms of, I guess, locations and structure and things like that? And the leadership level now, but what does it look like?
So the EIS is just, we're here to provide outstanding support that enables sports and athletes to excel. We primarily support Olympic and Paralympic sports. Certainly that's kind of the purpose of our funding. There's a little bit that goes beyond that, but not too much. So we provide a range of services across the board, really, from things like biomechanics, analysis, data, through to psychology, lifestyle, strength and conditioning, physiology, nutrition, some medical services like physiotherapy and medicine, and I probably forgot some. So we provided sort of this raft of support for athletes in primarily the Olympic and Paralympic world. We've got sites based around England, in Manchester, Sheffield, Lilleshall in Staffordshire, Loughborough where I'm based, Bisham Abbey, Bath and Weymouth, where the sailing team, where the sports are, we will be. So if there's a cluster of Olympic, Paralympic sports in a town or a city, you can pretty much guarantee we'll be there working behind the scenes to support them. There's about 400 odd people employed by the EIS now. It's about 90 odd when I started. So it's kind of grown hugely over that period of time as well. So
it feels like, it's more, I'm not sure if you mentioned, but in terms of coaching, like their event coaching, that would sit outside of your remit, and then you're the support package around for every athlete.
That's exactly right. So the coaches that would sort of sit in national governing bodies of the sports. And then we have a mixed model. So some of our services the sports pay us for. So there's a sort of semi-open market element to it. And others are sort of free of charge, for want of a better term. They're not free, they're paid for by somebody, but they're almost offered. And those that tend to be the areas that we think actually as an Olympic and Paralympic system, the sports need extra help with, or it might be some new ideas that need sort of pump priming and driving. So we do some stuff with data. Data's a sort of a bit of a hot topic in most worlds, I guess, at the minute, is in the sporting world. So we've got a bit of a central function to lift the bar in terms of practices around data, hygiene, visualization, so on and so forth, that has come into the organisation in the last couple of years as sort of a service we provide to sports, primarily for free, because we want to see that accelerated across the system.
When we say data, are we talking about kind of just the collection of data, performance data, analytics?
Yeah, I mean, everything really
under the sun kind of thing. Because you obviously see now more and more people wearing the sensors, and in every sport.
Yeah.
Is it that? And obviously for you, 40 different sports, that data is probably coming in totally different ways.
Yeah, so we've really started with medical data, so medical records as well, which obviously need huge amounts of confidentiality and protection around them, because it's obviously highly sensitive information. So to start with that, and it started to build out and plug other elements in, whether it be your training plans. That central data service is probably there as much there to help people understand how to structure your data in the first place, so it's not random Excel sheets dotted around hard drives. But then beyond that, how to best use that, analyse it, so on and so forth. You're right, there's a huge amount of data that's collected. Probably in honesty, not all of it. You have to question whether all of it's warranted, whether it's needed. And I think that's one of the next spaces to look at. It's still an athlete at the centre of that, and these are the pros and cons looked at of the data that's collected.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess it's general life as well. We're all getting data collected on us about
all the time.
Probably too much. Yeah. I'm really curious about, in terms of, obviously you've got the model, you've got the wraparound, and I'm thinking about like the edge cases right on there. So you've got, like you mentioned, really top level elite athletes, and I'm assuming as they're getting to that level, or to be maintaining that level, their team becomes larger. and there's probably more support required, maybe, I might be wrong. And then how that kind of funded on that end, whether it's, like you said, there's some paid for services. So what at the other end, there's obviously a cut-off point where someone's eligible for some support and they're not. And she might, like, in terms of my experience over the years, you've got to set a benchmark, right? So then there's a certain level that needs to be met. But if, especially Olympic sports, injured, missed competitions, you might drop below that benchmark. It's how do you assess, how do you manage that over a period of time? And obviously some people develop later in life or whatever. So there's like all kind of things to add.
The athletes who can access EIS services are probably determined by two things. One is their funding status by UK Sport, or the funding body in the UK for Olympic Paralympic sports, and they will have a matrix and criteria by which there, I think it's about 1,200 athletes who are currently funded on those programs, which goes through the governing bodies of sport. So there's that function, which kind of that's out of our control. That's kind of decided by UK Sport, and they do that on an annual basis every year, every 4 years, and they review that. So based on various performance targets and potential and years, the potential mode podium at the next Olympic Games or the one beyond. So there's, and the other is what the sports, the agreement we might have with the sport. So they may look at, well, we need some psychology, we need some physiology, we need some nutrition. Well, this from the institute, they them from somewhere else, and they work with, well, which athletes in your team do you want to do? You might purchase a day of nutrition, for instance, but you've got a squad of 50. You might say, well, actually, we don't want that delivered to all 50 because that, with the dot's not enough time, but all we can do is afford this. So you'll kind of work in partnership with the sport to see where they want to prioritise that support, really. It is different if you're one of the athletes that's on the margins.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe someone you've been working with and they maybe drop off really the funding plan, and then it's like...
Yeah, it's really
difficult. Would you have a thing where they'd come to say, oh, I'll pay you to do it if they had the funds themselves, or is that kind of just
no, well, it's not just quite a cliff edge. There's, depending on the service they're providing, there's obviously a period of time that they can continue to receive that support, particularly if they've, say, got an injury. You certainly wouldn't let them drop off a cliff there. For a number of months after that, they can continue to receive treatment for medicine, physio, if they've got a pre-existing injury. We've also, in the last couple of years, just increased the time post-exit in a world-class programme for what we call performance lifestyle, and that's how we support athletes to be making sure they can get a career after sport, their well-being, their general ambitions there. And we know that transition period after leaving a world-class programme is the first 2 years when you exit that are really tricky. You're sort of trying to find your identity as a person if you've sort of had to retire or your sort of career is looking like it's over. So in the previous cycles, we provide that for 6 months post the decision to sort of stop your funding. That now goes for 2 years.
I think that's important. You hear about it in obviously pro sport as well, where you get like obviously a bit of a bubble around you. So I'm probably thinking now it might be a baptism of fire, someone trying to go and get a GP's appointment or something when they used to just being able to speak to their team doctor 100%. Or whatever it be, things like that.
Yeah, 100%. Now, Olympic athletes aren't quite so, the finances in Olympic sport are not what they are in football, so they can't do that, but they are institutionalised. They fly around the world, but somebody's doing that for them. Someone's booking a flight, someone's making sure the passport, if they need some sort of visa to go into a country, someone's doing that for them. So the bits there, you've got on tap medical services. Athletes do have a GP, but kind of got somebody who's got a bit more time and a little bit easier to get hold of than
that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
so there's lots of those things that do change. The biggest thing, though, for athletes is their identity. When they sort of end of that career, have got to transition from there into something else. Might be in sport, might be outside of sport. That identity of having been a world-class athlete and then changing into whatever else it might be.
Yeah, the next chapter.
Yeah, so we have increased our support in the last few years for that, which is the right thing to do. Got some great people working on that to keep lifting the bar in that space.
Yeah, and obviously working. We normally ask about kind of your biggest highlights and stuff in your role, and for you, I'm assuming it's to do with performance on the other end. So that maybe athletes that have achieved, or maybe you've had a big project and you've had to kind of a lot of work in. Have you got any that spring to mind in terms of some highlights of performances you're involved in, or maybe it might not be that, just highlights of?
Yeah, I'll probably give 2 or 3 from I've been fortunate to spend a few different sort of roles in the organisation and in my career, shifting from sort of working directly with athletes to now sort of leadership of an organisation, really. So I think certainly as a practitioner, I think London 2012, I was fortunate to work with the Triathlon team into there and part of their support team during the event as well. So to be in Hyde Park in August 2012, can't believe it's 10 years ago, but to obviously see the performances, but also to see the crowd and the atmosphere was just incredible to still sort of feel and hear the Mexican wave of sound that went through the Serpentine in Hyde Park.
It's almost like a massive profile change for triathlon as well, wasn't it?
Oh, huge.
It wasn't I guess going in 2012, maybe that's just the casual armchair viewer, I didn't know anything about triathlon maybe, and it come out of it as like super.
No, and it was lucky where it was in London. It was quite iconic in terms of the visuals. Hyde Park, you ride your bike down to Buckingham Palace, you do that a few times. So there's obviously lots of sort of iconic buildings and stuff that was around. But yeah, I think as a practitioner, that was very, very hard to beat a home Olympic Games. And as a practitioner, he was always dreamt of not only working with an elite athlete, but working with somebody who won Olympic gold in the space of a few days. I worked with a few athletes who supported a few athletes that did and just won medals or performed. So I think certainly that. But equally, I think as a practitioner, you can get as much out of someone's dream is just to go to an Olympics and know that they're probably never going to be quite talented enough to win. And when I worked in speed skating for a number of years, there was probably a few athletes there just going to 1-2 Olympic Games and coming 15th, but you kind of know the journey they've been on. So they were always highlights. I think as when I stopped sort of to transition into more leadership roles post the London Olympics, and I became head of nutrition at the IS, so leading the whole service provision for. I remember in my job interview, and you sort of get the question like, what would success be? Or some question like that normally gets asked. I remember sort of saying, well, look, I could imagine we'll sit in 2020. I think I used that timeline at the time, and success would be the athletes would be saying how amazing it was for the nutritionist from the IS and how impactful they've been on my performance or something like that. And I remember at the Rio Olympic Games watching, so 4 years earlier than I sort of predicted in my interview, and a number of the athletes said that in some form, and I thought, okay, this is quite cool. And seeing the impact of the team that I built, these incredible people and practitioners who had worked so hard on behalf of those athletes and dream of building the best nutrition service in the world, and our sort of marker of that success would be athletes would be sort of singing the praise. And to see that sort of in those post-event interviews when they just had success was a real incredible bunch of people to work with 4 years to do that. So that's for sure.
I was going to say, I suppose that I'm assuming that athletes calling it out and singing the praises, you probably get inbound from other countries, maybe saying, "Oh, what are you doing over there? Can we learn from you?" And all that. Is that how it works? And obviously, if you're building that like elite, the best nutrition service in the world in elite sport.
Yeah, I mean,
people want to learn from you and understand what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we've done that. It's one of those things you can't really measure, so I can say that, but I can't really evidence it. I'm sure there'll be some other.
We could quote you on it.
We'll call it that. That's fine. That's fine. I think we're probably the world's best institute as well, but across the board. And I think my period of 16 years in the organisation, working in Olympic Paralympic sport, Team GB, Paralympics GB, have gone from scraping in the top 10 in Olympic medal table to real Olympic Paralympic powerhouses. Like we've been to sort of see that rise and sustain that success post the London Olympics. I mean, it's been really impressive. And of course, you sort of see people from across the world looking there. We get requests for people to come and can we come and visit the IS because we want to know what it is. We're generally quite open to that because the magic is the people. That is the magic. You employ great people and put them in the right direction. And we naturally work in a really inspiring environment. If you're working in a place like the IS and don't get inspired by elite performance, it's probably not the place to be. But if you are, really, it's not hard to get motivated every day to and help the athletes achieve something amazing and fulfill their dreams. So we have great people. We've not lost a huge amount of people over the years to other nations. It's one of those things you get asked every now and again, surely you're losing a lot of staff to other nations. You lose the odd one, of course you do, with an organisation of 400 people, but it's certainly not a huge element that we've seen across the Olympic and Paralympic system. You've seen coaches go to other nations and so on, and that naturally happens. IP goes with them as it naturally does, but it's still the secrets of the people, so the knowledge is not that special.
Yeah, like you touched on building the team, not getting the right people in the right seats and stuff. But how was it for you in terms of moving from like being a practitioner into that kind of the world leadership? And was that a big kind of culture shock or baptism? You're looking at totally different things, right, to day to day?
I think it is changes. I've probably had 2 phases of changes: that direct practitioner into leading other people, and then but within my profession, and then when you're leading people from other professions and part of a leadership team of the whole organisation. I found the transition from being sort of an experienced practitioner into leading other people within a service not easy. And if you'd have asked me 10 years ago when I was starting that journey, I certainly wouldn't have. It was easier. The consequences of your decisions weren't quite as you were leading people from us who saw the world in a similar way because you all had a similar professional background as well. So, but it was a great training. The transition I found harder was to go from leading within my profession in nutrition to then stepping up and leading people from 7 professions. Right. Now 8 professions, and also sitting as part of a senior leadership team of a business and an organisation, and you're dealing with boards and stakeholders. So, and the bit I struggle with is, for the right term, is that when you're a technical expert, I spent God knows how many years training and studying nutrition. I knew my safety net was that I knew quite a lot of stuff about nutrition, So it was like you had a bit of a sort of technical safety net. When you go and lead in other professions that you don't know as much about, or you've got a superficial understanding, that your safety net all of a sudden isn't your technical knowledge, it's you as a person, your own values, your own behaviours, your own decisions. How about how you hold yourself, how you go about your business? And I found that transition far more daunting, to transition from leading in one profession to leading many and in an organisation, and going from leading 20 odd people to 200.
Yeah. Well, I guess you said there about that, the 8 specific areas. I'm assuming, and maybe it doesn't work like this, but everyone's got their agenda, right? So I'm sure you're a specialist, nutrition specialist. It's almost like that from a medical point of view. If you have an injury, you go and see a surgeon, they're probably going to operate on you because that's the way they're looking at it. Do you ever find that in terms of the different practices, like saying, oh, it's a nutrition issue or it's a psychological issue, or maybe not issue, but this should be the focus?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's totally natural and totally understandable. And I think certainly what I've tried to do over the last 5-6 years in this role is sort of break down that a little bit and bring people together. In a day, athletes don't just do nutrition or psychology or strength and conditioning. They do them, and they do it really well. And so you need to be able to work together. You need to be able to bring that team together and break down those barriers. What it brings is great diversity of thought. When you've got people from different professional backgrounds, look at diversity in that sense, they've all got a different view of the world. They've all they can all see a bit of the picture.
Yeah,
you've got to be able to, I think as a leader of that type of team, is pull them together and make the most of those different views and lenses. What took me a while to figure out is that it probably meant that I needed to make the decision. They probably weren't going to get to agreement as to let's go left or let's go right.
Yes, you take all the information and then make the call.
Well, you've got and you've got to kind of take in all their views, make sure people have not just felt that they have genuinely been heard and understood, but the chances are, if you kind of, not that you try and go for a vote, but you'd kind of try and sort of, I probably spent far too much time the first couple of years, particularly in this job, how can I get them all on the same page, all in consensus and all in agreement? And I kind of learned that was pretty difficult. Maybe there's a way of doing it, I don't know, but I couldn't find one. So it was really then became about listening, pulling that on board and going, okay, this is what I've heard, this is what I'm going to go for this reason, this is where we're going to go for this reason, and that to be quite effective.
Yeah, I think, like you said, given that rationale, probably everyone would respect it to say, yeah, you take it on.
As long as they've been heard. Yeah, they might not like the decision, but as long as they've been heard, I think that's really, really important.
And normally asking, and I'm hoping that you can have some really groundbreaking insights on this one. We always ask about kind of like performance. So obviously you're talking elite athlete performance. Now we're talking like business leaders, like senior leadership team performance, and obviously different skills, but there's also like stress, anxiety, all these things that come in when you're running a business or running an organization. Is there anything that you do that kind of, you talk about like daily routines or habits and stuff, but also people we're talking nutrition, and maybe if there's any secret tips out there that we should be doing? I know we should be drinking so much coffee probably, but what's the take from your side?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, human performance is human performance, whether it's about winning an Olympic gold medal or sort of a high performing leader of a startup or business or FTSE 100 company or whatever. So I think when I took on this job, actually, I definitely bit off more than I could chew. I was doing an MBA at the time, took on a new job. My wife was pregnant for our second child, and we decided to renovate the house. And I remember getting about 6 months into the job, 6 weeks after the second child here, so sleep was an issue. End of the first year of an MBA, the whole house been turned upside down. I mean, we really put ourselves through it, to be honest. I just remember thinking, I'm really struggling here. Was in there. So I almost had to sort of find challenges to come out the other side. So things, for me, exercise is absolutely key. Absolutely essential that I get outside, do some exercise, have something outside of work that does that. So
do you think everyone has that feeling, like you have exercise and you can feel the positive, positives in you? Is it different for you to how you look at it from, like, you probably know the studies linked to it, and you know that I always know just a feeling that I need to move on, because sometimes you get that, right? You've been in an office all day, or you've been sitting behind your computer, it's like, I've got to get out there, get some fresh air. Yeah,
that's exactly what I've learned over the years. Like sometimes going for a walk, take the dogs for a walk, have a walk around, put a podcast on, listen to some music, getting outside. For me, I'm currently obsessed with trying to get better at golf, which is
a lifelong obsession for most of it.
Yeah. It gives me something else to think about. So I think that's sort of having something else, physical activity, exercise, I think is really important for me, for sure. I think linked with that, I've always found mindfulness really useful. Certainly that period of time I just described where things were taking a bit off more than I could chew, I found mindfulness really invaluable. And I kind of have periods of times where I do a lot and periods of times where I do nothing. Right now, don't do much, but I know it's always there. During COVID, I did huge sort of put the Headspace app on, which I used at the time, and do some mindfulness. And so I found that really, really useful. I found making sure you take time off. I think as a parent,
so like vacations wise, or just
or just time off. Yeah, time off work, and genuinely switch off. Like, so I've sort of learned when you have your 2 weeks off, like, I'm off. Like, people know how to contact me if it's absolutely urgent, but I'm off. I found that to be invaluable, particularly with kids.
Definitely, that's what I was going to mention. I was asking you, but you reminded me there in terms of with the kids, or just in general, kind of family time or whatever. Like, I've found managing my notifications is one. Like, I just just switching them off, because you have your phone around, but that constant, every email comes in, ping, ping, ping. I go and check it purposely now.
I took my emails off my phone.
Yeah, nice.
That's the next step. I'm in control of when I check them. And when I turned on the computer, I turned off the automatic notification that comes up every time you got an email, or the little red circle. So that you're in control of that. I think it's easy to fall in the trap of sort of like feeling you've got to do everything as a leader. And I think it's a really dangerous trap. Doesn't mean you don't work hard. Like, you've got to work hard, but you've got to balance that as well and find that balance. And sometimes accept that you'll be really busy and that's going to be fine, and some of those sort of bits might fall off, and then there's going to be periods of time to recuperate, because that's what you do with athletes. Aren't always on. They're not training all day every day, and actually they adapt to the training in the periods of time when they're resting. And I've kind of always figured that if that works for athletes, it must work for humans. If that works for a muscle, it must work for the brain and everything else. So I try to apply that as well. I found that even with the family time, there's a naturally introverted character, so sometimes the thought of a 7 and a 5-year-old running around screaming is probably not what I want. So sometimes quiet time also means no family time either, and working through that and not punishing myself if I don't feel I've not spent enough time with the kids.
So like taking that time for yourself to exactly.
I think it's important. None of us are superhuman.
No, and that's the thing. I think probably maybe it's not really discussed or whatever, but in my opinion, it's like, if you want to be the best parent or best dad, best anything, best version of yourself, you got to look after yourself first, right? Before you can give that to someone else. If you're not right, then you can't pass it. You can't give it.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's really important.
Last question for me. It's a bit of a reflective one. We normally look back, and it might be something that might turn into advice you give athletes. But if you could go back in time and talk to yourself before you started your career, or maybe just probably before you went to university, that type of age, what would you go back at? What one piece of advice would you go back and give yourself?
Oh, that's a great question, isn't it? I guess there's so many. The things that come to mind is be persistent. Like, if you want something, be persistent. There's going to be barriers that are put in your way. You're going to fail. You're going to go down some dead ends. But I think being persistent, if you truly want to achieve something, and you might not get there, but if you aim big, you might get somewhere that's pretty cool as well. So, but I think that persistence in achieving that is something I see in athletes when they're the really successful ones. Is like they will find a way to succeed. Be persistent.
No, I like that. I love that. I was going to say, it must be really, like you mentioned, it being inspiring working in that environment, but just even that, watching athletes go through all the struggles to get somewhere, it's kind of puts it in perspective for yourself in your role and stuff, thinking, I can't give up because I've just watched 20 people doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
over all these setbacks and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's like an iceberg, isn't it? You only tend to see the bit that's above the water. I know there's loads of analogies and memes on social media about those things, but I think it's really true. You see an athlete who's been successful, and if you're watching them, you see the medal around the neck of the national anthem and the Union Jack. Or what's really cool about the world we work in is you get to see the journey, and the journey is normally up and down and bumpy and messy and a little bit crazy, and it's a real privilege to go on the journey with them. And sometimes I go and give presentations to students about working in sports science, that type of thing, which I'm always happy to do. And I sort of try and talk about those difficulties sometimes, because I remember watching people, I'd sort of get inspired by people 20 years ago coming and giving similar sort of careers type talks, and you sort of see the stuff that works really well. They give you the shiny, polished version, and it's not shiny and polishy, it's messy, and it's nowhere near as slick as it might look. And so understanding that journey that sits behind, I think, is really important. Well.
Yeah, definitely. Like all of our listeners and business owners and stuff will know as well that it's never like up and to the right all the time. It's all up and down. And
it's backwards. And it's how many entrepreneurs, by the time they actually hit the jackpot, are probably on their 10th business or whatever, that have failed. So, those stories you hear as well. So I think it's any walk of life is sort of trying to think of that iceberg that sits up, but below what you see is important.
Yeah, I love that. Right, Kevin, thank you so much for your time and being so transparent with us. It's been a
pleasure.
Great time chatting with you.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's gone quickly.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.